Welcome to Meet, Act, and Part, a Masonic podcast hosted by Midnight Freemasons Greg Knott, Darin Larners, Todd Creason, and Bill Hostler. The views, opinions and experiences that are expressed by the hosts or guests as individual Freemasons do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant body, or Masonic authority to which the hosts or guests belong. And now on with the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part. Hey, this is episode number 60. I can't believe it. We made it to 60. So anyway, we're your co-hosts. Let me introduce myself as Greg Knott.
And I'm Darin Larners. Bill's not with us tonight. He's under the weather, so we wish Bill all the best and hope he gets better soon.
Absolutely, Bill. Hope you're getting better as you listen to this. And, of course, we wish you all the good health here to end 2023. So, can't believe we're at the end of 2023, and it seems maybe kind of appropriate. The topic we're going to cover tonight is magic. And Darin and I were talking about this the other day, and I said, we ought to do a show on magic. And we'll get into a little bit about how that even came up. But magic can mean a lot of things, and we always say this is a magical time of year. And so, we can discuss meanings of that, magic and related to degrees and Freemasonry, and Darin's done a lot of work and study in this area, so it's really a great topic that I'll be interviewing him as much as anything on this, because it's not a lot of things I've delved deep into. But how we came on this was Darin and I were at our Shrine Club meeting the other night, and we had a magician. And Dave, who's one of our fellow Masons and Shriners, is also a magician on the side. And he just did a very short show, and he did a great job. And the kids and the adults, we were all like, wow. I mean, it's just funny what you can do with magic. But as Darin and I were having a side discussion, I said, we ought to do this next episode on magic. And it's something that's always intrigued me. I've never delved very deep into it, honestly. But so anyway, that's our topic. So let me just give just a tiny overview from a novice perspective, because I think this is the neat thing. Darin and I will come out with different, depths of knowledge tonight. But to me, magic is just something that maybe you don't quite understand, or it's not a clear explanation. Magical could be something. It could be a feeling. It feels like magic, or it feels, magical. Of course, we always hear growing up, we'd all go to the Magic Kingdom down in Florida. And I guess magic in a way is a transformational maybe feeling or experience. But let me stop there. And so, Darin, there's a little bit of what I know or don't know about magic. But how would you just introduce the topic of magic in general, and then we can delve into it from a Masonic perspective?
Sure. So I think it's important to differentiate at the beginning of this that there's kind of two kind of definitions of or ideas behind magic. So you have like stage illusion, which is, sleight of hand and card tricks, pulling a bunny out of a hat, the stuff that Dave was performing the other day. That's usually spelled, classically with the C at the end. So MAGIC. Magic with a K refers to more of the practice of ritual or high magic, or also there's low magic, which we'll get into here. But low magic essentially is focus on fulfillment of earthly desires, whereas high magic or ritual magic or ceremonial magic, they're all kind of interchangeable, is more about spiritual growth, energetic practices, ceremonies, and the rituals around those, and invocations, evocations, those sorts of things. So we'll kind of touch on all of that here tonight, but that's just kind of a high level of when we discuss magic. We'll be probably more focusing on the ritual, the higher magic part, because I believe, and I have before I get into that, I should say, like, my definition of magic is not strict. It essentially is whatever, you can give a name to when you have an intention and you apply it and there's what you perceive as a result. So really simple way to think about it is, Greg, have you ever been in the car and you're thinking about a particular song and then amazingly you're flipping through the radio and that song's on the radio? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, and lots of examples like that, more than just the creepy stuff that Google's showing you when you think about something. But
well, yeah, I mean that I think what Google is does, and I found myself victim of this as well, is that where I have, probably at some point searched for the thing that I'm currently thinking about, and I, kind of forgot that I was thinking about it earlier, and then it surprises me. I don't think that, Google can read our thoughts. At least I hope not. But
I hope not either. We're all toast.
in any case, so that's kind of my definition of magic is very broad. It's, that idea of, you kind of talked about things being magical. So like, I think a magical experience can be, if you're at a concert and there's a band, performing and the crowd is really into it and it just kind of feels like a special moment, right? And I think that's, I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, related. I remember 1994, the Eagles had gotten back together, and a group of us went to the Riverport Theater in St. Louis area and saw them. And we had 5th, 6th, 7th row seats, so we were right front and center. And I'd never heard them live because, of course, they'd just gotten back together. And I just remember that feeling leaving there was just, because I'd always wanted to see them in concert, because through high school, of course, all you listened to was, cassette tapes or later CDs of them. But yeah, you're right. It was that magic feeling, that it's almost like it puts you on a different plane leaving there. Mm-hmm. So don't you assume that man has long been fascinated with magic in some shape or form, all the way probably as far back as you could go to reasonable history?
Yeah, I think magic was probably the first form of religion. I think that, you can find even the anthropologists are with their studies of, Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthals, or, kind of the species that were very closely related to humans. You see kind of this idea of something spiritual or some form of, magic, or, just bearing trinkets with their deceased, and the idea that, they had some sort of rites, for death, and call it magic, call it religion. I think they're kind of intertwined, although, I think that magic is very steeped in religion. A lot of magic, revolves around the idea of invoking higher entities, if you will, spiritual entities to, help you gain knowledge, or at least help you experience or feel closer to, the creator. So I think it's all intertwined. If you think about miracles that Jesus performed, what other explanation is there for those other than magic? He created wine from water. He raised, Lazarus from the dead. These are magical acts that he's going around performing. So I think, that again, I think spirituality, magic, and, religion are kind of all similar philosophy with different practice, if you will.
Yeah. It seems like there's, for the individual, there's got to be some bit of faith, and then faith in believing the unknown, or believing things you don't understand, and accepting the fact that, there may just not be a cut and dry explanation for how something in particular happen, as simple as maybe the card tricks we saw with Dave, or, the more complex things like you've mentioned from a religious perspective. There's something in there that kind of says, yeah, I'm not quite sure about it, but there's got to be some, level of belief in that you saw, what you saw, kind of a thing. And so, I guess I'm saying there's probably a lot of uncertainty, in when you talk about these things, because I assume people they'll feel them different, or they may see them different or experience it different. So it's an individualized experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have people that, will practice ceremonial magic, will say, especially when I kind of talk about Freemasonry being, a form of ceremonial magic or ritual magic, that, it's not magic because you're not doing this, that, and the other. And that's kind of where my broad kind of idea or understanding of magic takes place. And magic is much like Freemasonry, where, there's not a valid definition of what magic is or what it isn't. I think, to each person who practices it or studies it, I don't practice it, but I study it. It holds different meanings, and I'm sure that, it would be the same as asking maybe a Lutheran and a Roman Catholic to explain the differences between, their faiths, because they're very similar. There are differences. Obviously, Martin Luther had some grievances with the Roman Catholic Church and aired those grievances and split away, and that kind of formed the Protestant branches of Catholicism, or Christianity, I should say, because they ceased to be Catholic, I guess, at that point. And I think the same is with people who probably practice magic. There are people, I think, that would practice magic that would say, that their Freemasonry is either a form or very closely aligned with ritual magic. And then there are some practitioners that will say, "Oh, no way, Jose, that's not it's not magic what you're doing." So I think also part of it is, how we practice Freemasonry. If you want to talk about Freemasonry as a magical system, when you practice, I think, Freemasonry with intention, and everybody in that lodge has the same intention, and you're all doing it for the same purpose, which happens, in our degrees, I believe more so in our meetings. But I think, the opening and closing ritual is kind of still a magical ritual, but I think more, especially when you are in the degrees and you have that sole intention of bringing that, man to light, and in his first degree, and then continuing that journey of light in his second and third degree. Everybody who is there has, the same intention. And I think, that when we do a degree properly and with correct intention, that something magical is occurring in that lodge room, and that we are, that there are different actions that we perform that are magical actions, and that we are doing, a magical working, if you will, on, not only as a group, but upon that individual. And I think that's powerful stuff.
And really, it's kind of illustrates the power, as you just said, of any ritual. I mean, whether it's a Masonic ritual, a degree, or, as you mentioned, things in the church, or a wedding, or even go back to our Boy Scout days, things in, that we did at either Order of the Arrow or any other number of ceremonies. There is a transformational process. And I think part of that, a graduation ceremony. There's something, even I've attended numerous of those. It's like you come in one way and you leave another. In other words, you've hopefully grown through the experience of whatever it was that you just went through. The wedding, the degree, the graduation, the church service. It almost seems like a means of personal transformation from one stage to another.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's kind of what magic is at its very root. It's the creation of an intention out of nothing. So you have these words and rituals and movements that, accompany the words that are designed specifically for a purpose, which is normally as you said, often used in in initiation practices, but also, can be, as you stated, a church service, or, we talked about a concert, or, just even, this happens to me quite a bit. And I kind of learned that, when you're, for example, here's a couple examples. I had one experience when I was thinking about having to talk to Lisa's Uncle Ben about, it might have been something for St. Joe Lodge, or I can't remember exactly, but I was at the Walmart in Savoy and, thinking about Ben while I'm shopping, and I come out of Walmart and who should I wander upon but her Uncle Ben. And is it coincidence? Sure, but is it something else? I kind of think so. I just think it's just so random to be coincidental, that whatever that, I feel like my thought manifested Ben being there at that time, and maybe Ben unrelatedly thought around the same time I was thinking of him, I got to go to Walmart to get X, Y, and Z, and that the two worlds kind of collide. I'm sure you've had examples in your own life of similar kind of coincidences like that. Well, are they coincidental? I mean, I guess that's the question that the one could ask. The more I study kind of the magical arts, if you will, the less I kind of believe in coincidence, and the more I believe kind of that manifestation. It's not like I could sit here and manifest, $1 million or, a certain amount of money. But what I think, proper practice of magic can do is almost, in your visualization work, if you will, you start to visualize your end goal, and then, things come into your mind which can help you get to that end goal. You think about, for example, I have an idea that pops in my head for a book. So, it's up to me to write the book. My belief is that these things aren't, that we write off kind of as coincidental, may not be. I think that the universe is kind of a living entity itself, and that we all are interconnected in this universe. And these are the lessons that the prophets taught, and why we need to be nice to each other and love each other, because we're all kind of part of the creator, part of the universe, and we need to treat each other as such. I think that if we could get people to understand that we all have a divine spark within us, that we are all, part of God's creation, or however you define God, I think that there might be, one would hope there'd be less violence and less evil in the world, but.
So, I mean, again, I think I agree with you. I do think people are interconnected more than we all probably realize. I think, again, magic can, however, again, there can several definitions of it, but I think it is a means of trying to help explain or help understand some of those interconnectedness that we do share. And it's, again, I go back to that means of transformation from one thing to the other, and I don't, I mean that just in the simplest of terms. Yeah, I guess this is why it's so hard to just, I looked up a Wikipedia definition, and of course they're all over the map, just because there's so many potential meanings that it has. And, but, again, coming back to the Masonic ritual, there is a feeling, especially when you're first coming into the lodge as the entered apprentice, where you don't really know what to expect. And I think most of us would agree that when you leave those degrees, you're still not exactly sure what happened, or what all the words meant, or what all the ceremonies meant. But you went through something. And of course, by the end of the third degree, you've really, I think, people, you've seen it, they're really appreciative of, and somewhat, and short for words on what they did experience. And I think it's only over time that as you see the degrees as a non-candidate, that you start to begin to slowly grasp what it means. And I've seen 15 years worth, and I'm still not sure I fully have that as all the understanding that I want to have, because I learn more, even just in the 3 degrees, even though I've heard the words before. It seems like I may hear them differently from one time to the next, especially in the lectures and as you pick up on things, and maybe life experiences help transform your own understanding of, quote, what the magical effect is from, 1 degree to the next, or even from one certain age where we are to the next, because I think that's maybe just personal growth, but I don't know. I keep getting things out of them. So is that magic? Sure. In my mind, it is magical to me to keep learning. But, so I guess that's the thing too, is that as you grow, learn, experience different things, your understanding and how you define these things, I think, progress and change over time as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when you really start to look and dissect the ritual as we currently have it, and, the floor work, obviously that differs by jurisdiction, but the purpose, the intention is there in all the ritual. But, what I think one of the things that, I think that we also need to think about as Freemasons is that when we are all there in the same room and we have the same intention and we're doing this intentional work in our lodges, that there's power. You kind of touched on how you've witnessed it, and you observe or you feel different things through watching the degree or participating in it and helping confer a degree. And I think, that what we're touching on is this idea of this, it's called an egregore, which essentially egregore is a form of, for lack of a better term, it can be negative, it can be positive, magical kind of energy or entity. And that in our lodges, that when we kind of are intentional in our degree work, everybody's on the same page, everybody is kind of purified their hearts, and they're really intent on giving this candidate the best degree that they can give them. That we're creating this positive force or energy that can help kind of give a vibrancy, if you will, to a lodge. And I think that we have to think about Freemasonry kind of in this mindset of, well, what happens when we don't do this? Why are lodges closing? Well, they're not bringing in guys. They're probably reading the ritual from a book, or not, really intentional about the ritual. They're, probably not guarding the lodge room from the outside world, and these are all kind of things that should be happening in order to create a positive egregore. And when we're not creating positive egregore, we're creating a negative one. And, the positive egregore, they love all that positive love and energy that you're given in a well-intentioned degree. But if you stop feeding it, or on the flip side, if you're just kind of mumbling the words and you don't really have much intention behind it, and you're not intentional in your work during a degree, I think, the opposite can happen, where you form an egregore that's kind of negative, and it just kind of feeds off of negativity and it brings negativity into your lodge. And I think, we've probably experienced both. Let's hope at St. Joe we're kind of on the positive track, but, not to besmirch any one individual, but we, had a situation where there was a member of our lodge that, basically was very disruptive. And it got to a point where there were many of us, myself included, had a hard time coming to lodge because of this individual. And we essentially had to politely ask the individual not to come to lodge because of that kind of negative influence. And I kind of think about, that where, it's kind of the idea of one rotten apple can, spoil the bunch. Yeah. You also have to think of Freemasonry kind of in the terms of from a magical standpoint, that if it's our intention to create very good, positive initiatic experience for the individuals we're bringing through, then we need everybody on that same page, and we need everybody positive and having that same intention. And when that's not happening, I think, that's where we see kind of the decline of lodges. And I think, whether or not Grand Lodge knows what they're doing when they give, kind of the blueprint to get a Grand Master's Award of Excellence, I think essentially, they're giving a lodge a formula to remain positive and active and do positive things in their community. And that helps feed the egregore in their lodge and keeps that egregore positive. And when you're not doing those things, when your lodge kind of stagnates or you aren't bringing in new members, the lodge kind of gets to a point where it's on the verge of dying. And I think, maybe some people say, well, that's just the life cycle of a lodge. And I'm not going to disagree with that, but I think there's also something deeper kind of at play as well. So,
you think about the comparables to a ball team. I mean, it's the same thing. We've all seen teams at high school, college, or pro level that they appear on paper to have all the talent in the world, but for whatever reason, they can't seem to put it all together on a court or a field. But yet you'll have these other teams. And of course, the NCAA tournament is the, ultimate sort of example where you'll have a 16 or a 14, 15 seed, knock off a 1, 2, or 3. And the whole difference is whether we call it teamwork or these other things we've been talking about, it's all of those people are in rhythm. They have a common goal, and they're feeding off the feeling of each other, and really do, they've got talent. But I think it's the same thing, Darin, that you're using the analogy with the degree. We've seen flat degrees. All the words have been said, the same words that could be said, like on a Monday night, and we leave there. It's like, well, God, that just wasn't very good. And you can go the very next night, and the thing it just seems magical. I mean, it's just funny because I think one of your points was how we feed off each other. And, here's something I was thinking about. Why would I join the lodge? And I think, well, let me give you a good example. We had an inquiry at Ogden lately, and this inquirer said he wants to be part of a team, part of a brotherhood. And, how do you achieve that? Well, it's that feeling that you're going to leave with a good degree and you're working towards a common goal or, a common success factor that you're trying to achieve. And it's like all of those things need to come together, or to your point, Darin, the lodge falls flat and it starts to go backwards. And we've seen it. And it is a lot like a ball team. The coach is continually, trying to do things. God, of course, you and I have seen it with the University of Illinois ball teams for decades. You'll have those ones that seem to have had all the talent, just can't put it together. But yet, again, you'll have these other ones that maybe they're not the rock stars, but they seem to be putting it all on the same page because through teamwork, and I think that's based on those feelings that they, get to succeed and want to, help each other get better. And, to me, that's sort of an intangible benefit you get out of being in a Masonic lodge, is that teammate and camaraderie piece that you can take not only if you're successful in the lodge, but take it into, your career or your family. So that's to me, it's a very valuable piece of the puzzle that I hadn't really thought about until we got into this kind of a discussion. But is that magic? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think, that's why I believe that the idea of having a harmonious lodge is so stressed in our ritual as well, because, wherever this ritual originated, and yeah, did it come out of kind of the guild system? Sure, but why did they adopt it? These are things that answer questions that we probably will never be able to answer. But the idea is still being that, I kind of believe that we may not be directly, descended from the mystery schools of Egypt or Greece but that we are philosophically descended from them, if that makes sense. And I think the idea of having harmony and being harmonious in a lodge goes along with this idea of, everybody being on the same page, everybody having the same intention, and them, understanding, because from very early on that this ritual that we're using or the allegories that we tell are more probably ancient or related to more ancient ones than we even know or can trace. And in that a lot of these mystery schools were essentially designed for people to become priests or holy men or kind of some of that. So you have this underlying, again, intention of transformation into something more or closer allied to divine or divinity, and that in order for everyone to get there, we all have to be on the same page. We all have to have the same intention. We all have to have, pure hearts. We all have to follow the lessons of, in the Masonic sense, Freemasonry, keep, divisive topics out of the lodge, keep that lodge as a sacred space, and then have the members, be very dedicated to the intention of the ritual, and how they're pronouncing the ritual, and how they're having that intentional almost sacredness, or treating the ritual as sacred, much as we treat the volume of sacred law that we open on our altar as sacred. That the same thing kind of applies to the lodge room. And when you think of the lodge room, and it says in our ritual that essentially lodge room is modeled after King Solomon's temple. Well, what did King Solomon's temple hold? The Ark of the Covenant. And it was very in the Holy of Holies, and the Holy of Holies could only be entered one day a year by the high priest, and, various rituals had to be performed to purify himself to be able to be in the presence of the divine. Well, if the King Solomon's temple is a repository for an aspect of divinity, basically within the Ark of the Covenant, our Masonic lodges are as well. And that's, why we need to treat our work as sacred and be intentional and with what we do, because we are, I think ultimately, when we open the lodge, we are purifying it and cleansing it with our ritual to do our sacred work. And then when we close the lodge, we're basically then, we're basically preparing ourselves to go back to the profane world. But while we're in that space, we make it sacred with our ritual and our intention. And when we do it properly, I think that the transformative experiences of our degrees, or even some of the better meetings we've had, or when we've had really good education that has kind of been thought-provoking, all these things are able to take place in that sacred space. But when we aren't intentional, when we just kind of half-ass it and just kind of, go through the motions, if you will, well, we're probably not going to have a good degree or meeting, because our minds, our hearts aren't there. So, that's where I think, if the listeners take away one thing, it's just to, have that intention, have that purity of heart, and think of what we're doing as something higher or more, sacred or divine than you might normally think of it.
So, a few things that come to mind as you described all that. One is you use the word repository, and that's sprinkled in the ritual, in various degrees, not just the first 3 degrees, but repository in the sense of, we always talk about this ancient wisdom and ancient knowledge that's been passed down from one generation or one part of man to the next. And, it, even in a sort of literal sense, it's true because there is a repository of knowledge that is been passed down, at least in organized Freemasonry, for 300 years. And it does, show you maybe not all the deep, secrets of the world, but it is like a guidebook that can help you be that better person. To me, that's when we're talking about these transformative pieces of knowledge that are being passed down. I think that's all part of it. It's not just all the esoteric pieces, even though you could argue maybe those are esoteric, but even from an applied standpoint, it's like we keep passing these down and keep using them. But it kind of leads to my next point or question. You can go through and have a great ritual, have it letter perfect. Everybody leaves there with a good feeling that you did a good job on the work. But, and this is where, of course, why we have podcasts and other things. How do you dig into it deeper, from an educational or study standpoint? And this is sort of a loaded question, but I mean, don't you think you got to peel that onion back just a little bit more, even if you've memorized the lecture? But for the members in the room to get to even that next level of deeper understanding, they're going to have to study it. And I think you mentioned, having an educational piece where we can get into having some of these discussions. To me, that's like the next level of the magic or the transformation.
Yeah, and you're obviously, I think, going to have, I think the lodges that are, for example, Space Novum up north. I went. I don't know if you know this, Greg, or I think you do know this. That our good friend Robert Johnson was elected master. My wife Lisa and I went up to their Feast of St. Andrews because they do their officer installation as part of that. As part of that feast, and it was a privilege and a pleasure for me to see RJ get installed as worshipful master of that lodge. But kind of to that point, all those guys up there are on the same mission or path. They're kind of lockstep with each other. And I think that you have various lodges where when that occurs, there's potential for very, very special things to happen. And that's not to take away from kind of our ragtag bunch down here that does the degree work in that, but it all, I think, boils down to having the membership of your particular lodge to understand that there's something more, for lack of a better word, spiritual about what we're doing, and that that we are kind of dealing with the energy practice, I guess, if you will, that some of our membership just is not aware of, or doesn't want to be aware of, or doesn't really care. They go in, and that's kind of where we have to separate Freemasonry from magic, is that when that magic is you being intentional, you having the intention of giving birth to this new candidate and giving him a mystical experience and the degree. And when you're all on the same page in doing that, I think it's more not only beneficial to that candidate, but I also think beneficial to those individuals, because they really, everybody again kind of experiences that together. And that's, when we were talking about earlier, the really good degrees versus the degrees you come out of when, it's just kind of flat. I think that's a perfect example. When you're in a very moving degree and you come out and you're, wow, that's a great degree. Everybody did great work. The candidate really seemed to move, that you successfully did a magical working. But again, on the same side, when you don't have the intention, when your heart's not in it, when I won't say but the collective heart isn't in it, or somebody's just there going through the motions and not really having that intention, that kind of will throw off the degree. And that's again, I think I'm going to hammer home this idea of intention, that's the mindset that if we wanted to really, really have that kind of deeper spiritual experience in our degrees, that's the mindset everybody has to have. Because if it's not there, I feel like if one person doesn't have it, it's not going to happen. Just because, that it's got to be everybody, again, that team working together towards that goal. And if you've got a team in the NCAA tournament and you got a player whose heart's not there, what's probably going to happen? He's probably not going to perform well. You're probably going to lose that game. I think the same applies here, where, you have to have, everybody has to have the same mindset, if you will.
How do you think leadership impacts this? I mean, all of these, again, going to the ball game analogy, and we've seen it many times. There could be that special coach or that special player. They seem to have a almost charismatic, air about them, that they can come in, and that starts affecting the others in a positive way that helps them put the team together that perform at these high levels that we're talking about. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be the master of a lodge. There can be somebody that's just that leader within the group that kind of helps set that tone that others, in some ways, they want to emulate, some ways they want to be a part of, some ways they may not want to let somebody down, some ways they're excited by the energy that person brings. So leadership is probably, and I don't say it is probably, I think it is also a vital part of this. If you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, some of the great churches have, there's great leadership in some of those churches that have these transformational experiences for people. And I can also see, we've had masters of lodges that, man, they just really put it together and the lodge is growing and all this. And then sometimes after they're done, that leadership element is missed. And so I guess, what do you think, how important is the leadership aspect in some of these things we're talking about?
Well, I think that's important as well, because, if you have a master who is kind of gone through the line, but really just kind of is doing it maybe for more, I don't know, selfish reasons, if you will, I think the lodge will suffer. The effective leaders that you see normally are, again, the ones that lead by example, that are collaborative, that are communicative, and, kind of get everybody to buy into their vision, right? And when that happens, I think you have potential for very good, Masonic experience and good degrees, so on and so forth, because they'll put the right people in place, the ones that they know have the intention to do the work in very much intentional, solemn, manner, having, that kind of respect for what they're doing, as opposed to, a guy who just is kind of, oh, I'm master, but I'm just, waiting to get out of the East and phoning it in. And, we've kind of seen probably in our Masonic experience, the whole gamut. I think that having an effective leader is obviously going to help a lodge, because that leader is going to have that intention, and at least be wise enough to know that, if I don't know the ritual well enough to confer a degree, I'm going to find a guy that I can trust to do it, that's going to have that intention. I'm going to pitch in where I can help out, but I'm not going to we're going to try to all have the same intention to do this, and I think that's why it's kind of important, and to sing praises of our master at St. Joe, having that kind of knowledge of the ritual and the floor work, and I really believe he's got the intention, whether or not he knows that, it's what he's doing is magic is inconsequential in my point of view, because, he's doing it for the right reasons. And he's also trying to get the lodge to buy in and do the work so we can all grow together and, learn together and give our candidates a very good initiatic experience. And I think, that's kind of where, the saying, what is it? Teamwork makes the dream work. It may be corny, but it's true. We can accomplish more together as a group than as individuals. And, it just takes a matter of doing things and trying things and getting out into, the community. And also when we're in the community, making sure that we're, as individuals, representing Freemasonry in a positive manner. Case in point, just short segue, but the night of RJ's installation, I got back and had gotten back to the car, and I forgot something, or got back to the room at the hotel, forgot something in the car. So I was coming back into the lobby, and the clerk, had inquired as to why I was dressed up. And I explained, I'm a Freemason, a good friend of mine was installed as master of his lodge. And, he relayed to me kind of some of his personal history, and that he had a great-grandfather, grandfather was a Mason, and had somehow encountered a Mason and brought that up. And the Mason replied to him, well, that doesn't mean you can be a member. And I mean, that's just, to me, I was mortified. I was like, with all the problems we talk about having with membership, who in their right mind would be that much of an elitist, I guess, to automatically judge somebody based upon, their looks. That's why we do the investigation. That's why we get to know these guys, and we make sure that they're going to be a good fit. We guard the West Gate, but if somebody's showing a genuine interest or even trying to bring up conversation, that's the worst thing to do. And that's I didn't press him for where it happened, or any of those details. I just kind of apologized. And, he asked some questions about Freemasonry that I explained that, the belief that came out of more the medieval guild systems. Some will say Templars, others will say, XYZ. But I think, at least the best direct evidence we have of where it kind of arose from is from the stonemason guilds of the medieval, times, and then kind of morphed into what we have today.
Yeah. So getting long here in our hour, but if I had to summarize it up and go into that exact example, I mean, here in those stone guilds, they're building these just beautiful cathedrals that sometimes would take literally decades to build. And so they had all these elements, I think, that we've been talking about. They certainly had to have leadership, because somebody had to direct the project and think about how long of a time frame that was. They had to have skills that they could use together in unison, to build what they did, because they certainly don't have the modern tools as we know them today. They had that intentional perseverance, Darin, that you mentioned, both from not only, I think, the leadership aspect of it, but also the craftsmanship aspect. And I think there must have been something transformational for them, because just as you indicated, I mean, our best guess is that our Freemason rituals came out of them. And to me, it's sort of romantic to think that they came out of it, but I just think of it more from just a practical standpoint. It's like they had all these things going for them: the feeling of being on a team together, the leadership, the goals that they set to achieve in terms of, constructing an edifice. And, eventually they, took those practical things that they were doing with, tools, and then developed more. And it's like, there's literally an esoteric side of this too. And that's what I think began sort of that transitional period that morphed into how we know it today. And so when we do talk about Freemasonry being this repository of knowledge, absolutely it is. And though I can't go out and cut a stone per se, I think those skills that they were transferring down from, one generation to the next is still what we're doing today. And so our opportunity in the lodge, we talk about it from a magic aspect again, is to sort of use that magic and those skills to put it all together to not only transform for the candidate, but also all of those in the lodge that are participating, not only in the degree, but even in the meeting. So that's, as I think about all that we've been talking about tonight, and this is not how I thought about it when we started, that maybe that is the magic, is putting all those things together.
Yeah. Again, I think it's, just having that intention of creating that very moving experience for, if it's a stated meeting for yourself and your brothers in that lodge room, or if it's a degree not only for the candidate, but also for yourself, to your point, and we can maybe, as an offshoot, I have talked about in some of my articles in the Midnight Freemasons about how, the guilds weren't just a guild. They were, a school. They taught men to, do mathematics, geometry. That's why we adhere ourselves, or we're told to cultivate and practice the liberal arts and sciences, because these are, essentially what classified for schooling for these men, and not only the men that join the Masonic guilds, but I'm sure also carpentry or any of the trades. They had to learn how to do some mathematics. They had to know how to read and probably write. And this, and at those times, it took the place of formal schooling, because let's face it, the only people probably getting any sort of education in the medieval times were the upper echelons of society. So, if you were going to be a priest, you would learn Latin, and you would learn, how to read Latin, write Latin, translate it into various languages. You probably learned various languages. And this, took the place of formal schooling. The idea of, really kind of standardized education or formal schooling is relatively new concept, if you think about it in the history of the world. It's normally been reserved for those that are probably the upper echelons of society. But as an aside, I'll just say, if you're interested in learning more about magic and how it applies to Freemasonry, I would highly suggest Jamie Pollam's book, Myth, Magic, and Masonry. Came out a few years ago, but it's the very first part of it kind of goes into this relationship, a very high level, but very good summary of kind of the inner relation of it. And then, from there you can dig deeper. But if you're interested in just kind of a very layman's introduction to kind of high magic or ceremonial magic, I would say Damien Eccles' High Magic's probably a very good book, very user-friendly for those who are, not familiar with what kind of magic is. Damien Eccles was if you remember this case, there's been multiple documentaries about it, but this case in Arkansas where there were these 3 teens that were kind of sentenced with circumstantial evidence regarding the killing of one of their peers, and ended up, these guys got on death row and eventually were pardoned, and Damien was one of these 3, and it was part of the whole satanic panic of the 80s. He was, they played Dungeons and Dragons. Damien was kind of practicing magic at that point, ceremonial magic or high magic, and was just further evidence used to kind of railroad him. But he's, now out free along with his comrades. I think they were freed in the early or mid 2000s, maybe a little later than that. But he wrote this book, I think in 2017, 18, High Magic, and he's come out with a few others, but just very high level, I would say, layman's approach to if you want to start practicing some basic magical rituals. for brevity of time, didn't get into tonight. Maybe we'll address, kind of expand that relationship at a later date. But
yeah, well, I've learned a lot just by talking this through, and I hope our listeners did too. I guess as we get to the into 2023, and I think we'll do another episode somewhere in the next few weeks, sort of recapping, but I just want to take this moment to thank Bill and Darin for all they do to make this podcast successful. If it had been just me, we wouldn't have got past episode 1, but Darin and Bill just do an excellent job. And as we get, into this holiday season, Christmas and Hanukkah and other things, and just want to wish everybody the best of all those holidays, and hope they can have a magical time, perhaps with their friends and family over these next few weeks. It can be stressful, but I think take some of those things we learn in Freemasonry and apply them, and it'll also help you get through these holidays as we get towards the end of the year. So I'll throw it to Darin, see if he's got any other closing comments.
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. And again, thank you for your kind words towards myself, and I'll speak for Bill as well. But it's a team. I think that if it was left up to any one of us, we may not have gotten very far. But I think we all bring our unique talents to the podcast and our unique perspectives, and I think that's kind of what makes it work. And I hope the listeners, have plenty to think about after tonight's episode. And thanks again for listening, and happy holidays, as Greg said, to all of you.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and we appreciate all of you, and we hope you'll come back soon and listen to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part.
Thank you for listening to Meet, Act, and Part. For more information about our show, visit our website at www.meetactandpart.com. While there, please consider supporting the show by sponsoring us on Patreon. Until we meet again, may we meet, act, and part.